Welcome once more, everyone, to another webcast of Alexandra Mayers Live. And today I have a special guest on with me who is a financial and economics expert. His name is Stephen Washington. How are you doing today, Stephen?
I'm good, Alexandra. How are you?
Great. Now, Stephen is out of the Ohio area, and he's an assistant professor at Central State University. And he specializes in finding wealth generating and investment opportunities specifically for women and African Americans. So, being that I'm a woman and an African American,
Bingo.
you're interesting to me, and something I really want to focus on over the next few years is trying to generate a bit of wealth. But let me ask you, what initially piqued your interest when it comes to economics and the world of finance and marketing and all that kind of stuff?
Well, when I was in college as an undergraduate a long time ago in the mid 80s, for some reason I was attracted to economics, probably because it's very tied to current events. And I was always like current events, politics. And so I tried to major in accounting and quickly found out that wasn't going to work. But then economics, had some business in it, but it also had some political science. So I was attracted to that. And then when I got my master's in finance, I did an internship in Boston at what at that time is the Bank of Boston. And I met people in something that I never heard of, which was called socially responsible investing. And back then, that's getting started, actually, where people were creating stock portfolios based on their ethical values, right? Which back then would be corporate governance issues and environmental issues. It's expanded now. So I was attracted to that because I saw that, particularly for minorities and women, is the way to invest, to sort of fold in those political issues and other social issues into your investment portfolio.
Well, that's interesting. Now, explain to me exactly what the Black wealth gap is, because I kind of have an understanding in regards to what you're referring to. And just so people know, your Twitter account for anyone who wants to follow you is at wealthgapnet.
Yes.
But explain to me what the Black wealth gap is. Your field of expertise ties into that, and how you think some change can be made in regards to the situation.
So good question. Thank you. The Black wealth gap is basically the fact that African Americans have a huge wealth gap compared to white Americans or just the population in general. Same is true with Latinos, same is true with women. And so happens that African American women are actually the least wealthy demographic group in the country. The average net worth of an African American female is $100. So what is net worth? Is your wealth. So if you want to know how quote unquote wealthy you are, you need to calculate your net worth, which is a very simple calculation. It's your assets minus your liabilities. So when you hear Steve Bezos is the wealthiest person in the world because his net worth is about $110 billion, that basically means if you add up everything he owns and subtract everything he owes, liabilities, he nets out at $110 billion. So your net worth is really your wealth, and it's not about income, it's about wealth. The wealthiest African American in the country is a guy named Robert Smith, no one's ever heard of. But he's worth $2.5 billion, and he got that through buying technology companies, not through entertainment, not through athletics. That's why no one's ever heard of him. So that's how you build wealth. You really build wealth by creating companies and or investing in companies.
That's interesting. Now, what companies or investments would you specifically recommend for Black women?
So I think specifically the best asset to collect, the best asset to have are quote unquote financial assets. What are financial assets? Paper assets, stocks and bonds, ownership in companies. So I would say that's the best type of asset for anybody to own for a number of reasons. A, it's um, it's the most liquid type of asset that's going to accumulate in value as compared to property or even a private business. B, because of technology, the entry level is very low. So you can get started investing in stocks, which are literally ownership stakes in businesses that you already consume. You could get invested in stocks with $5. So if you've got $5, you're in the stock market.
A lot
If
of
you've got
people don't know
$5,
that. I mean, that's really good advice because I know a lot of people they don't know that. That's something I've only learned about over the past few years. Really, is that you don't need a lot of money to get into the stock market.
so and it's so and when you look at this economy, and it really is growing. That's global. You're really the only way to participate in it is to own a piece of it. So, and the only way to really own a piece of it is to take some of your income and put it to work in ownership, meaning buy stock. And so now, if you're a minority or a woman, I think you want to do that by looking at what do you buy? What do we buy? If imagine having a consumer profile, or I should say, an ownership profile that looked like your consumer profile. So if you're buying Nike tennis shoes and Air Max Ones, that's great. Buy the stock. The stock is actually cheaper than the shoes. How about that? So
That's good to know. Yeah. Let me ask you, what's your perspective when it comes to the cryptocurrency trend? I've seen a lot of news about that. There was actually a documentaries about the development and the rise of cryptocurrencies on Amazon Prime. That's where I was watching that. But what's your view? Do you think that it's too high of a risk? Do you think it's just a trend or a fad? Or would you recommend to people to get into putting their money and exchanging their money into the cryptocurrencies?
I think the first step, it's not, first of all, it's not a trend. It's
okay.
Here to stay. The most important thing about cryptocurrencies is understanding the technology behind cryptocurrency, which is blockchain technology. And that's really what's going to take off. That's why it's here to stay, is because the concept of a decentralized ledger, where code is used to verify transactions that are anonymous but also secure and verifiable and can't be altered or changed or defrauded, is the way of, that's basically how bookkeeping or accounting is going to work forever. So cryptocurrency is just the first application of blockchain technology. I would say definitely invest in cryptocurrency, more so right now as a way of educating yourself. By participating, you'll learn, and then you'll get to figure out if you want to, quote unquote, invest and take risk, as opposed to accumulating over time in order to be able to have it. Just as a quick aside, there's a website called Coin Flash App, all one string, Coin Flash App, that allows you to connect your debit card to a Coinbase wallet account. And then every time you use your debit card, it automatically rounds up the spare change to the next nearest dollar, and then invest that in cryptocurrency.
Oh, really?
So you could accumulate either Bitcoin, Ethereum. I think he's got Litecoin and Ripple on there too. Accumulate it passively over time, as opposed to, oh my God, let me set up a Coinbase account and buy a Bitcoin, and oh, now it's down. I would just passively accumulate it while actively educating myself on it. But I just had one of my students, I gave a presentation in class today about some of the technologies that are coming on the blockchain that are just off the chain. Now, there is a Black-owned company called Guap that's actually issuing a coin called Guap Coin. You can Google it, and it'll be the first African-American cryptocurrency.
Really? Okay. Well, that's good to know. And, when I edit this interview, I'll go ahead and, put all these links and everything in here, along with pointers as far as how people can get to these sites. But tell me a little bit about some investment products that you have going on right now, because I know that you mentioned that there are some things that you've developed.
Mm-hmm. So, as you know, I have the Black Wealth Network, and you were actually the face of that until we were bought, and then they changed the piece. But that's still out there, and that's just a mutual fund platform. But we're working on now two things. There's there's a company called Impact Shares, which is at impactshares.org, that is launching a gender and African American focused ETF, or two ETFs, one focused on women, one focused on African Americans. An ETF is an exchange traded fund. And the African American one, which is partnered with the NAACP, in fact, the ticker symbol will be NACP. This will be the first mutual fund actually structured with African Americans in mind, and they're going to use the index I created as the index for the fund. And the index is and it's based on African American consumption. So the fund will look like what we buy. That's how the portfolio will be built. So if you put money in this fund, it's sort of like you're investing in your own consumption. So if you're buying those Nike tennis shoes, that's great because you're going to get some Nike dividends, which is the whole point of selling tennis shoes in the first place, so that the shareholders can make money.
Right. So that's really interesting. I'm glad that you are doing that. Now, for a person who's really just getting into investing and learning about economics, what would be your go-to starting point to recommend to them? Because you've already mentioned so many excellent resources, but if there was one go-to place that you would recommend, what would it be?
Well, if it's to invest, to me, the best go-to place, and there's a bunch of them that you can get started. The one I like the best is one called Stash. The website is stashinvest.com, and Stash allows you to, with $5, open up an investment account, but you can choose a portfolio that matches, your goals or your outlook. And so you're invested in stocks. It's only $5. There are a couple of others, but I like that one. The best. Stockpile is good, which has gifting. So Stockpile is good if you want to get started and then try to get other people going, because you can actually electronically gift card people stock. So you want to give somebody $5 worth of Nike just to get them going, you can do that.
Wow. See,
yeah.
I'm learning stuff today. That's cool. Now, I don't want this to be too long of an introduction. I do hope I can have you back kind of frequently, because you're really knowledgeable. But I know that you mentioned to me that you wanted to share your thoughts on an inadvertent advantage that minorities might have in regards to some of the recent tax law changes. Do you want to discuss a little bit about that?
Well, I think regardless of your politics or what you think about the overall tax law and who is benefiting, I think it's going to overwhelmingly benefit wealthy people. However, it's built for business people. So the biggest thing in it really is the significant business tax cut. So the top business tax rate is going from 35% down to 21%. And what that has already created is a huge cash windfall, especially among these large publicly traded companies. And so to me, because a lot of wealth is going to be distributed through these companies, because here's what they're going to do with the tax cut. They're not going to hire a bunch of people or give out a bunch of raises. They might do that for publicity for once, but what they're going to do for the most part is pay dividends to their shareholders and buy back stock, which is another way of paying their shareholders. So I'm imploring everybody to get in on that. The only way to benefit from that is to be a participant. And so you get yourself into the stock market in a diversified way. To me, you should do it along the lines of your consumption. If you're saying, what stock should I buy? what companies do you buy from? You know, are you a big fan?
Right.
You do a lot of Netflix, because you better get Netflix stock. It's going through the roof. I mean, are you a big fan of Amazon? You better get some because it's going through the roof. Do you use Google every day? I do, because every time you click on something, they make money. So, I mean,
Right.
so it's like, get in on it. And that's the only way to get a piece of that tax cut that's going to flow. And we're talking literally
All right. Well,
billions of dollars.
Well, that's really, I mean, today was such good advice for, women, young people, everybody, because you would be surprised. Like, I grew up not knowing anything about economics or finance. I'm just now really learning in my life, and that's the one thing that I regret not being more knowledgeable about, which is why I'm trying to, get this kind of information out there specifically to young Black women. But I hope I can have you on again for a brief time, maybe next week. And I hope that, we can touch on some more subjects as I learn a bit more. But everybody, make sure that you do follow Stephen on Twitter at WealthGapNet. And thanks for coming on and chatting with me a little bit. I really appreciate it.
Alexandra, one last thing, especially for your African American female listeners, there is a resource called Black Girls Do Invest. And I think if you Google it up, they got a Twitter, and they've done a number of seminars. In fact, they got some events going on now. But if you're interested in just connecting with other African American women who are focused on investing and growing and learning, Black Girls Do Invest.